I'm just so pleased that we get to embark on an 8-week reading of the New Testament of the Bible, and that we get to do this together. And so before I describe this week's reading, let me just take a moment to talk about the New Testament of the Bible, kind of how it's comprised and what it is. Now, the Old Testament of the Bible begins with those famous words, "In the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth." Now, the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the idea is there is this swirling chaos, and God speaks into the chaos, and our Creator, He creates trees and rivers, flowers, animals, and human beings. And there's this beautiful image at the beginning of the Bible where God is actually walking in the garden with Adam and Eve, and you have the presence of God in this world that is unspoiled by sin. But then sin enters the planet, and it's like sin messes with everything. It's not that everything's wrong all the time, but like something's wrong with everything. Something's wrong with every form of government, with every family and every company. Something's wrong in every church and in every human heart. And so the question that the Bible poses is this, is how can the presence of God be restored? And how can people who are wrong with God become right with God? Now, the Old Testament story, God selects a group of people, the chosen people, the Israelites, in order to have a special and unique relationship with Him. And in their story in the Old Testament, there's lots of ups and downs, but there's more downs than ups. But with the New Testament, something brand new happens. God Himself enters the broken planet. You see, Jesus comes, and Jesus, the Son of God, lives the life that we couldn't live. And He died the death that we should have died. And it's our opportunity to know Him, to trust Him, and to follow Him. And so the story of the New Testament is unfolded in 27 different books. First, you have the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which describe the life of Jesus, His ministry, crucifixion, and resurrection. And there's the book of Acts, and the book of Acts describes the actions of the disciples. That is, what did the disciples do when Jesus leaves? You then have 21 different letters. Most of them are written to new Jesus communities, churches, but some of them are also written to individuals. And then the New Testament concludes with the book of Revelation. So 27 books in all, 4 Gospels, the book of Acts, 21 letters, and then the book of Revelation. Now, as you read the New Testament, try to keep the first century audience in mind. I mean, these were first century believers who really needed this information, needed this word from God as they experienced different challenges and dilemmas in their first steps in following the Christ. So keep those readers in mind. A question we often ask when we open the Bible is, what does this mean to me? See, I think that's a great second question. I think a great first question is, what did this mean to them? How did this address situations and answer questions that they were experiencing, questions that they had? So we believe there were perhaps 9 different human authors that were involved in writing the New Testament. But don't forget the divine author. That this is the Word of God. Let God comfort you, speak to you, challenge you, and stretch you in these words. So over 8 weeks, as you read the words of Matthew and John and Paul, hear also the voice of your Lord. So our reading in week 1 begins with Luke Acts. And we've joined these two, Luke and Acts, because we believe they share common authorship, that Luke, who wrote about the life of Jesus, also authored the book of Acts, the story of what the apostles, what the disciples did after Jesus leaves. And we like to see them as a kind of a 2-volume set. Volume 1 on the life of Jesus, and then volume 2 on the early days of the church, the early days of the Jesus movement. Now, Luke is one of the 4 Gospels. Gospel means good news. It's the good news of God entering our planet in the person of Jesus. The good news of what He said, what He did, how He died for us, and how God the Father raised Him back to life. Luke, along with Matthew, Mark, and John, form the 4 different accounts of Jesus' life in the New Testament of the Bible. And so a few things about Luke's gospel that I would love for you to see as you read this week, kind of four themes that you will identify. The first theme is that Luke really pays special attention to the early events of Jesus' life. I mean, the birth in Bethlehem, the manger scene where the shepherds come, that's recorded only by Luke. And then Luke also records Jesus, Mary and Joseph presenting him in the temple when he's a baby. And then that story where Jesus gets separated from his parents in the city of Jerusalem during a feast when he's 12 years old. These stories are unique to Luke. And I can't help but wonder if Luke was actually able to interview Mary and others who were there at the very beginning of Jesus' life. And so that's one of the themes that you will identify, just as early events, the birth and the childhood story of Jesus.